Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on, disruptions, evolutions, opportunities, challenges, and interventions in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge. Sophie investigates the promise and reality of the future of work now and as we look ahead. She interviews people who are changing work experiences and practices and shares how we can each transition smoothly and successfully to effective and more productive new ways of working.
Hi! This episode is celebrating empathy at work for the 1-year anniversary of my second book, Empathy Works, the key to competitive advantage in the new era of work. This episode also marks the soft launch of my friend Minter Dial's revised and updated version of his book, Heartificial Empathy, about empathy and artificial intelligence. So this will be more of a conversation between Minter and me, rather than me interviewing him. I find it a poignant moment to have this conversation as extraordinarily powerful generative AI and LLM technologies get new, accessible, chatty interfaces. Aside from learning how to ask the right question or prompt, a special skill worth honing anyway, our key added value is our human understanding, our empathy. That sensitivity is what adds the nuance, elevates human inspiration, intuition, and flair, and brings in personal stories and relatable anecdotes. These elements are core to our ability to figure out what to emphasize and how to connect with a particular audience, ensuring that these facilitated, focused compilations of our collective consciousness resonate and allow us to sustain a distinct existence. Minter's and my perspectives both align and differ as we discuss counterbalancing the tech drivers of new business and work environments with human-centric workplaces, interfaces, and interactions. While we all haven't been practicing empathy much at work to date, to succeed now, we need to be much more aware, more proactive, to ask ourselves more questions and listen carefully to one another, especially as we discuss and decide how, why, where, and when to integrate, automate, and benefit from increasingly sophisticated technologies. And so to our discussion. Minter Dial is a management consultant on leadership and transformation and author of several books, including You Lead and Future-Proof. As noted earlier, he has just revised and re-released Heartificial Empathy, putting heart into business and artificial intelligence. Minter is also a prolific podcaster as host of Minter Dialogues. Hi, Minter. How are you?
Sophie Wade. How a lovely way to spend my Friday afternoon with you.
Oh, it's delightful to see you again, Minter. And you have been busy since we were last in touch. And reworking or redoing or updating, revising, modernizing one of your earlier books, Heartificial Empathy. What brought you on this journey to empathy and then the connection with AI? But let's focus on empathy first.
Well, so my journey into empathy would have been sort of by the back door, I could say, because I didn't really understand empathy. It wasn't part of my vocabulary, and it certainly wasn't part of my experience with the bosses and the people I was with in the environment I was at L'Oreal. It was definitely not a topic, empathy. Mm-hmm. However, what I saw the thing I started picking up, connecting the dots, was that the people that I gravitated towards, mm-hmm. where I felt stronger relationships that would bypass the corporate lines, was typically individuals who were more empathic and were more able to ask questions and then not bring it back to them, but maybe right, and then ask further questions and listen and then using that listening bring lovely ideas, like a vase of flowers for somebody who was feeling sad, or just unsolicited help and it's not obvious that that was a thing to do. Anyway, so once I understood that, I'm like, well, let me dig in on that. And then also I realized that I wasn't very empathic myself. I was understanding that I could improve my empathy. And so the writing of the book became a really good way for me to understand better my own level and understanding how I can improve and want to do better.
I do remember from talking with you about some of your work at L'Oreal in terms of dealing with customers. And there was a lot of leaning into trying to understand in an empathic way about customers, where people, if they're not necessarily internally within a company empathic, that externally they are. And it does seem that that was something that L'Oreal was good at.
As far as L'Oreal's approach, so after I left, they put in place a program to render all their salespeople, actually not even their employee salespeople, but the individuals who work in department stores, who are independently, let's say, contracted with L'Oreal to sell L'Oreal products in the big Macy's and such department stores. And they made the program to make them empathic. And the irony was like, well, you can't just delegate empathy to individuals who don't even belong to your organization.
Yeah, no, that's tough.
Right. But they realized that empathy was a great way to sell better. So great ROI. So for two reasons, this was the wrong approach. Really, it was all about money in the till. And two, I don't need to be, you be it. And so that sort of got my gander going as to what is an authentic leadership and this notion of having integrity and congruency. So having been exposed to that, I then said, well, how do you actually make empathy happen in business?
You found that you weren't so empathetic. How did you recognize that? What was it that you discovered? Or what were sort of the aha moments where you kind of went, maybe this is something that I'm not so good at?
Well, I'm afraid there's a little bit of a list, but one of them for sure is that I talk a lot. And when you talk a lot, I can bring the topic back to me.
Okay.
Right? It's all about me, after all. I like to tell stories, and then there's a second thing, which is I don't tend to feel what other people are feeling. I mean, I can, but I don't regularly have that sense of I'm feeling what you're feeling.
Okay.
So let's call that the affective version of empathy. So I said, well, then maybe I can improve. And then, of course, I also have experiences around me where I don't understand well their situation and the frustrations that might come from being, for example, sick. And what does that mean to you when you are disabled? And so these are things which I sort of started leaning into. And then I also had my friend who killed himself. And why wasn't I able to lean into that better? And, well, come on, you can do it. And no, well, none of these words help. Like telling somebody who's down, oh, buck up. No, that doesn't work. You're angry. Don't calm down. Good luck.
Well, as you know, having dealt with suicide in my family, that these are challenging moments to connect with when you can understand how they feel, but it's hard to connect. You can connect with the reasons, but you can't connect with the feeling in the same way. So it's the cognitive, but not the affective empathy, and therefore how to help, if there is a way to help. I want to get to empathy at work because Frans de Waal, the primatologist, said this is second nature to us. It's the foundation of human interactions and reciprocity and collaboration. Why do you feel that we haven't developed the kind of empathetic relationships that could have served us well for decades, for centuries?
So I'm sure you have a good opinion on this, but let's say that I link this question with the rising mental health issues.
Okay.
When I said I wrote the first edition in 2018, the next one in 2023. In between, there have been more than 300 books with the word empathy in the title, and so there's a lot of people who are aware of this, and now we're also more and more aware of mental health issues, and I feel like we've got to a situation where we're no longer able to deal with everybody else's problems. Everybody has so many internal problems that if I have a big zit on my nose and I'm talking to you, then I'm going to focus on that zit on my nose, and it's going to constantly come up. I'm going to feel it, and I'm going to think about it. And, this person in front of me, they must be staring at it too.
He has no zit on his nose, just to be clear.
And we get sort of warped and absorbed by ourselves so much that anything that happens becomes an issue. Mm-hmm. Whereas we live in this time of, generally speaking, great prosperity, generally speaking. And you wonder why all this mental health issue is coming up. And so why is it that empathy isn't coming around well? Because I think people don't have time. They're stressed. They don't give the time to listen to someone else. And they want to quickly bring it back to me. Because, by the way, it's all about me. And I link it in with narcissism because I feel like we've developed a culture of narcissism that Christopher Lasch talked about in 1979. And we're the generation of that. And it's just becoming more and more prevalent, is my opinion.
It's interesting. I don't do the coulda, woulda, shoulda in the past in terms of how we could have had more empathy in the business place. And it has been very transactional in the past. And because work was so different, it was very linear and static, and we didn't need to have the kind of closer human interactions that we do need to now. So it's a lot to do with technology and the pace and the unpredictability of business and the uncertainties. And that I see as being fundamental to the mental health issues, where we don't have a stable environment. We don't have a grounded sense of where we are. Now, that is not to say that since the 1870s, we haven't had extraordinary amounts of change, but the pace of change has been different. And that, for me, is one of the threads that has really been destabilizing all of us. And then, of course, the planet not necessarily having a stable future doesn't help the new generation coming up, where we do see the most mental health challenges, compounding the issues that we're facing now. And when I think about the pandemic and thinking about how that disrupted many of our operating principles, many of the ways that we were approaching things, I found that it really also helped us connect with each other, that we were all raw and vulnerable. And that enabled people to empathize better with each other for the first time. What was your experience?
Yeah, I saw the need for it. And I see the evaporation of it. So it might have helped make people more aware when you talk about subjects that involve death. It inevitably adds a little gravitas to the topic, as opposed to, my widget needs to be improved by 23%. Mm-hmm. And so you inevitably actually have to bring the personal life into work, because maybe my spouse is not well, or my child, mm-hmm. or usually not my child, of course, but usually my parents or my grandparents or whatever, because that was that reality. But when you're talking about life and death at work, it changes the nature of it, mm-hmm. and this idea of being empathic. But as soon as you come back to, well, what's the ROI? People are needing to come back to performance with the economy as it is, and the uncertainties, not just global change, climate change, but the socioeconomic and the outlook for politics is not very exciting. And I think a lot of businesses are going to stress.
Do you not see any positive, lingering, better understanding of each other in the workplace? In your experience, obviously you're based in England, but working in France and across Europe. Has it been such a stark reset?
Well, I have only anecdotes to talk about, but I do mm-hmm. feel that the level of unhappiness, the level of unfulfillment in general, not just through work, at work, is about as high as it gets. And perhaps that's the lingering element, is like, mm-hmm. what is this all about? Mm-hmm. What are we doing, Sophie, on this earth? What is my life for? And if it's to make widgets, so that's really not that exciting. And I don't know how to make myself more excited about life.
Well, I think that certainly here in the US has been something that has had a huge effect in terms of the understanding, the epiphanies that people have had about how they can change their life. The pushback when people discovered that they could be productive from home and that they could work in different ways, and actually being stuck in one place or the other place wasn't great, but having a combination and looking at work as being something that could be incorporated in a different way so they could actually enjoy their life, that has been huge and positive. Not saying that empathy hasn't gone out of some of the corporate psyche or the executive's approach, but this undercurrent of how employees are feeling about their lives and each other's lives, I think has been a significant mindset shift in which empathy is incorporated, or it is a red flag, perhaps, that is causing tension.
Whether it's empathy or pressure, that, and I'm going to add legal or societal narratives that are pressuring people to do the right thing or to be a certain way, as opposed to, I'm coming in this with a good intention of being empathic. I better not say that because that's going to get me in trouble. Or I better think about this because because my employee engagement numbers are terrible.
Right.
It's like by measurement and by
rather than
force.
authentic.
Yeah.
Right. So the shift that is necessary for this to really work is to have this be authentic rather than regulated, so to speak, or penalized if it isn't working. We've turned the corner into 2023. There's still extraordinary tension around the world in terms of the flexibility that is being asked for in the workplace. And empathy, for me, is a core piece of that in terms of, are you understanding what your team needs are? Are you understanding what people want and need, whether they have sick kids or parents or just a desire to be setting up their life differently? How are you seeing leaders across different types of companies and different sectors thinking more empathetically about their employees?
Right. Well, so I think there's two elements that make human-centric work really fundamental. And that first one is that there are many more ways for companies to engage, or the other way around, with their clients. And so that has made humanity more relevant within a business context, social media, and the ability for everybody to have a voice. Of course, the challenge with that is that you've now got, let's say, 100 customers or 1 million customers, but you have 1 million voices.
Yeah, exactly.
How do I feel that?
Right.
And this is relevant to the second piece, which is how to make it work with the employees, because you still need to tend to the customer.
Yeah.
And right now, sometimes it feels like the tail is wagging the dog. We need employees, we need to attract employees. What do we need to give to you? Well, we'll give you a Rolls Royce, we'll give you a jacuzzi and a foosball table. And how's that going to help with regard to the customer? So if I take it more pragmatically speaking, all right, let's give them flexibility. Let's have hybrid work. You can work when you want, from wherever you want. And how does that all jive actually with making the business work better with regard to design, delivery, and customer satisfaction? What do you think?
Well, it increases engagement. If you're trying to understand your individual employees and help them do their best work, then flexibility is the key way. There's a huge amount of research to show those positive benefits. Now, before that, it actually means also that each employee, helped by their manager, hopefully, understand how they work best. And that is one thing that the pandemic emergency conditions forced people to understand themselves a bit better. And that has helped increase people's performance and use these different working arrangements and parameters to help people work better. That's where I see all these different things being levers that managers and executives can use to help engage employees because the conditions are so much more challenging than they used to be.
So I have a couple of thoughts about that, Sophie. First is choice can be great, but choice can be overwhelming.
It can, yeah.
And especially when you have mental health issues. Do I have to get out of bed? Oh, no. I prefer to do nothing. So in that, I'm using that as an example of the issue of choice faced with a lack of meaningfulness or a sense of self. I may know myself better, perhaps, but I also see the nature of choice being very difficult to understand. And at some level, that there's this idea of decisioning that has to happen. So one employee wants to have certain types of conditions. Does that mean you have to offer it to everybody? And how do you end up with this tentacular, multi-flexible approach that still works as a unit, because we do need to perform as well. And so that individual engagement for that individual that needs this flexibility, at some level, there are two types of companies. One is the one you're making and you're hiring and you're creating the environment. The other one is you've got 10,000 people, you've been working for you for 20 years and you want to change towards that. And in the former, you have an easier choice because you can hire for attitude and you create it together. But in the latter case, which is obviously majority of the companies we're working with, they've got a lot of backwater and tougher tissues to break down.
The way that I always see and work with companies where it is successful is that kind of flexibility is decided on a unit by unit basis. And so it's not the whole company trying to work out, how can I adjust for like 10,000 people who all have different needs and wants? It is a question on a unit, and the unit may be 3, 5, or even 10 people. And understanding what is optimal per person, but then compromising. And that really comes down to empathy, of course. How can we, empathizing with each other, come up with something which is optimal on this project, in the next project, maybe something different. And so it becomes something which is ongoing dynamic, which then requires that much more human understanding. Yes, you certainly have people who have 20 years, 30 years of leading particularly and working the same way. And yet everything was changed during the pandemic and we managed to achieve an incredible amount. And I think that was helpful to show people, look what's possible. You can really change things up in a dramatic way and still be effective and work together. What I see as being so much of the challenge now is that everybody wants to have something more stable. Human beings are really adaptable. We do manage to deal with change, but we are creatures of habit. And so trying to get through this period of transition and transformation is about trying to understand each other, trying to empathize, understanding the mental health challenges of extraordinary change so that we can get through this and out the other side.
We need to apply, for example, empathy into understanding how we're going to make this work with our distributors, suppliers, customers, as well as our employees. And that the thing that needs to be that tied around is, why do we exist? And it seems so obvious, but so often we forget this piece. We're trying to do all this for what? Because if we don't have that anchor, then we're not actually making the world a better place with regard to the assignment of our company.
You talk about the ethics of empathy in your book.
I feel that empathy is a precondition for your ethics, but it doesn't mean you're good. Because in the end of the day, what are you trying to achieve? Who are you? And if you use empathy with manipulation, you're going to have manipulative ethics. I mean, that's where that goes. But it's a relevant piece to bring into the construction of an ethical framework.
So let's talk about technology. AI and machine learning have been changing business needs, automating parts of jobs. Let's just go back several years in terms of your seeing how things have been changing with regard to AI and how that has been changing the need for us to work in different ways.
The pace of change has definitely changed, and the styles of revolutions, or at least if we want to call AI a step change like the printing press, I think it's possibly the right call. But I would wish that we would, in businesses, be more focused on the meaningfulness of our business as opposed to the technology that's going to drive the number. Why are we integrating this AI? Why are we bringing this new shiny object into this business? And I hear it today. Oh, well, we need to use ChatGPT.
Let's assume that they do know why, right? So if somebody is taking the right approach in your view, how can they be looking at this, where to prioritize? If we're trying to serve our customers better and we're trying to make sure that our employees are engaged and doing their best work, how to approach it if this is potentially such a huge game changer?
Well, I've played with it a lot over the last months anyway, and it's extraordinary. So to give you some concrete examples how it could be useful for
please.
you, Sophie, one would be to hey, listen, I'm going to do an interview with somebody. This is what they have written. Tell me 10 really interesting, insightful, incisive questions that I should ask this person, and see what comes up. It's pretty interesting what does come up for having done this, and using different words and learning how to query differently, and then just to see what the differences are. And then, like everything with this sort of stuff, will bring your intelligence to it, bring your humanity to it. For example, fact check, or, that question would be really rude to speak to that person because that person would feel very upset, lack of empathy or something like that. I think that the way we go into using ChatGPT or any of these other AI, or for that matter, any other AI, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to use it to be more optimized? And are we trying to be cost cutting and make the shareholder richer? Or are we trying to make people's lives more fulfilled, and by the way, our customers happier too? And so that why still becomes relevant, because if it's led by the CFO or financial matters and ROI first, it's unlikely that it will pan out well over time.
Yes, I completely agree. If we start with why are we doing it, and doesn't that why need to be so much more consistent across the entire company? Because I think there are so many leaders who are focused on what's good for the customer, but they aren't thinking as much about the employees and how they're going to be impacted. So it seems that right now we really need to be thinking about this on a holistic basis. Otherwise, we could be making some quite serious mistakes potentially.
I totally agree with you, Sophie. So or at least that resume there. If I go back to my experience in business when I was running Redken, it was really an eye opener. I didn't really get it, so I can't say I went into this whole spiel I'm about to give you from the beginning. I got it as it went along.
Okay.
So this is the point of a holistic purpose. Everybody needs to feel some part of contribution and some part of benefit. So the specific element to that is that in any business you have a value chain, and people and departments along the chain are participating in contributing.
Right.
Hopefully. Sometimes it can, it's about
Sure.
making sure that the costs are in line and such.
Yeah.
And in the case of Redken, what we created was a purpose that was much bigger than just selling shampoos. Mm-hmm. And the really cool thing about it was that we made it come alive for everybody throughout the value chain.
Cool.
But not in the same way.
Okay.
Because you can't. So our purpose the mission we had was earn a better living, live a better life. And so earn a better living. I'm working in an organization, L'Oreal to name it, where there's only so much you can earn as an employee. We can't make you working in this brand, part of 40 other different brands, earn more money. But so how do you make that come alive for the employee? Because if you're making everybody else earn a better living, but not you, So we specifically looked at that part as for an employee of Redken, of L'Oreal. How can we make that come alive in a way that's legal and appropriate? Do the same thing with your suppliers. How can we help our suppliers? Because usually with suppliers, what you try to do is screw them and pay the least amount of money, right? And spread out the amount of time you want to pay them. Well, how can you think differently about that and bring them into the fold such that they can earn a better money?
Empathetically.
For example. Absolutely. This is an example of how I discovered empathy. And then we had the other part, which is live a better life.
Right.
All we're doing is selling shampoos. All right. Well, so what authority do you have to help people live a better life with shampoos? Is it the smell of a shampoo after your shower? Bon. It's
I don't know. Smell matters to me with my shampoo.
Hey, sure. We're not going to disagree with that for a second. But what we wanted to do was to make everybody feel, employees straight all the way through to our customers. And the way we defined our customers is important. We didn't go to the end customer. We stopped at the hairdresser.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because the idea of trying to go all the way to the customer of the hairdresser, to have them live a better life, earn a better living, seemed implausible.
Right.
So to my realistic piece. Because, it could have been we could have easily said, oh, well, wouldn't it be great for everybody to always live a better life? Yeah,
that's
but
tough.
Let's be realistic. And so this notion of having a purpose that resonates inside and out is really key. So being customer-centric is lovely. It's probably a sine qua non. However, make sure that it's congruent with what you're trying to live as an employee in the organization you got going and all your third-party suppliers as well.
One thing that's interesting that I was alerted to, it was actually a post on LinkedIn, and it was about somebody who was making a comment about the reaction that a chatbot had about wanting to be alive. And there was a sort of yearning in the responses. The machine is looking at zettabytes of data that has all our human foibles and desires and dark thoughts in there too. So that for me really elevated the importance of having an ethical, empathetic component that is recognizing that there's some potential dark sides which are already written into that text without us really knowing it.
So, at the risk of sounding like Dark Vader, these learning sets are naturally a reflection of us. We need to be deeply aware of our imperfections, our dark sides, our reality. And that's where you come to this idea of the ethics. So if you have good intentions, when you apply your empathy, then you're going to create an ethical framework that will be appropriate. If you have bad intentions, you make an ethical framework, maybe, probably not, but whatever you're doing it for bad purposes. And you can use that empathy for bad reasons. So I think that this notion up front of why we're doing it is so much more interesting for me.
Right.
Get that set in. Just let me frame this conversation around empathy and AI around this way. First, empathy exists and we should talk about it in the manner of coding. As in, how do we brief programmers who, generally speaking, are not the most empathic individuals, who need to produce the code. So there's empathy within coding, and I think that's an extremely nascent area that needs to be put on the table.
Yeah, very much.
The second one is with regard to the algorithms that are existing. So we have the algorithm that's quote-unquote open, that has an ethical framework, and then you come in and you use that, and then you layer in your company's version of it. So there's the ethics of the original team at OpenAI or at Google or whomever, and then there's the ethics that you use when you put your version of it. And then the third one is the empathy within execution, and how we then are mobilizing our troops, connecting with our suppliers and our customers with these algorithms, and what type of empathy we actually want to be implementing, and how congruent is it with us? Are we coding it in a way that's perfect? Or are we reflecting how you and I interact in the first place? Because maybe there is stress. Maybe there are times when you and I have an argument. Make there a congruency in the way we program the computer so it doesn't present us as perfect human beings or a perfect company, because sometimes we're not.
My concern from all that you say is that when human-centric understanding is important to integrate, when so much is opaque to the average employee, the fundamentals of certainly of the technology need to be as perfect as possible, perhaps, because so much of what comes out of computers, we assume that it's right. We are flawed as human beings, but we don't think about either the malintent, but much more the lack of intention that it's something maybe you've been programmed with, or an algorithm that may have been developed. So all those multiple layers where there could be errors or deviations that I don't necessarily understand, or compounding flaws. This gives me a lot of cause for concern. How do you feel?
Well, I hear you. And I think that if we are aiming for perfection, we will go nowhere. So the permission I give in this is to push out and try stuff. And if you accept that you are flawed, then it becomes easier to understand the imperfection that comes out, because that's what we're trying to do. The intention's right. We're not trying to be perfect. We have a purpose, and within that we have an ethical framework, and part of that is not trying to please everybody all the time everywhere. So that
right.
So we're being a bit more disciplined about what we're trying to achieve. It's actually about taking tough decisions.
So there needs to be that much more recognition and humility about who we are as human beings in order to allow us to really benefit in the most positive and productive way from AI and where we appear to be going.
Oh, I agree with that. I have no idea where it's all going. I feel like it's exciting to be witnessing this. And calls to stop the progress of AI are, I think, a reflection of the deep understanding that we are imperfect and that we are flawed human beings. And hey, we're about to show ourselves as being flawed.
That's true.
And we're back to this idea of holding it to a higher level than we hold ourselves, the lack of understanding of ourselves. So I feel like we have to, if every business is going to have to make these decisions, they need to be articulated around why they exist, and then hopefully that will inform the way you approach this, and it'll inform the way you as an organization are trying to work and grow and evolve. The world has a lot of things to fix, and I think I what I want to be is disciplined in how I can help doing that.
It's very interesting to me that we do hold machines to a higher standard than we have for ourselves when we're the ones that create them. Minta, what haven't I asked you that you definitely want to tell everybody?
Well, I suppose this, you mentioned at the very beginning how there's been more self-awareness. I think there's not been enough self-awareness, and I think we could all do better at understanding ourselves, spend the time to do that. That time spent will be time saved going forward and heartache removed going forward. It doesn't mean that we should be striving for perfection. It doesn't mean we should always be wishing to be good and perfect people. It means understanding that we are deeply human, deeply flawed, and be more accepting of these things. That's the self-empathy piece, self-awareness. And by having that self-awareness, I feel you're going to be better able to make choices. For example, why did I work with this company and not another? Because it links into who I am and what I'm all about. And if I'm doing this just because it's a paycheck, or if I'm doing this just because it looks good because my parents told me I should do it, or it looks good because it's popular or whatever, as opposed to what I truly believe I am, then that disconnection is prime material for mental health disorder.
Well put. And that really was some very practical advice, whether it's about empathy, to do with empathetic AI, to do with mental health. What can people do tomorrow that can help them in this multifaceted, challenging environment we find ourselves in?
Well, do something for others. Something every day, a little bit. Doesn't have to be all day, but maybe go in and cheer up somebody who is looking lonely, a stranger in the street. Talk to them, or put your hands in the earth. Get them dirty again and remind us of our connection with earth. And then look at your dirty hand and don't say, oh, dirty. No, say, oh, me, oh, my, and reconnect with people. So this is what I think. I do this myself. I mean, I will put my hands on the ground. I take pictures of rubber bands that are on the ground in their state.
Okay.
And it's been one of my ways to reconnect with the ordinariness of life. I call it ordinary beauty. Rather than focus on all the beautiful things and the perfect images and all this, and cars, for God's sake, I look at these rubber bands and I say, what are they telling me about me today? What are they telling me about the world I'm living in? And so I go out with amusement. I go out with some curiosity. And I have this little portion of every day where I'm trying to do something different and hopefully elevating the debate. So I'm living my purpose. I do it with intention, and I encourage everyone to find their purpose and then go about with intention, but not seeking perfection in that, but a little bit of every day doing something that just says, all right, I feel good about my day. That'll give you back energy. And today, if there's one thing we are so much missing, is having that strong regenerative energy.
For sure. Fantastic, wide-ranging, deep, going in all directions. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks again very much to Minter Dial, author of Heartificial Empathy, Putting Heart into Business and Artificial Intelligence, now in its newly released second edition. Minter is a leadership consultant and podcast host of Minter Dialogues, which is in English and French. You can follow Minter on LinkedIn and Twitter at mdial, M-D-I-A-L. He also has a Substack, Dialogues, Fostering Meaningful Conversations, which you can sign up to for free. Immediate action tip: do something for others. And reconnect with the ordinary things in life. Thank you for listening. If you are recognizing the importance of elevating our human connections and understanding in our tech-driven world, I recommend you read or listen to my book, Empathy Works, The Key to Competitive Advantage in the New Era of Work. Not only does it set the stage, explain the future of work environments we are trying to adapt to, but it also gives you many empathy habits to practice whatever your priority. Leadership, refining your company's hybrid model, sales, teamwork, and more. Great upcoming episodes will discuss generative AI in more detail, empathy, and the challenges of transformation in progress. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend, as well as like it, and write a quick review wherever you listen. For regular video updates, curated useful articles, research, and information, please follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at @SophieWade. If you want more understanding to help navigate this period of transformation, sign up for my Work in Progress newsletter on LinkedIn and read my blog, which is available on sophiewade.com and flexelnetwork.com. Until next time.